never worry about the consequences of missing a big shot, because when you think about consequences, you always think in terms of negative results. Zig Ziglar believes that most people don't worry about the consequences of missing a big shot, but for a totally different reason. He says most people don't even have a basket or a goal to shoot for in the first place. Zig Ziglar has been referred to as America's ambassador to the world. Millions of people in more than 100 countries have read his best-selling books, including See You at the Top and Top Performance. He is a leading authority in the area of human engineering and is one of the world's most sought-after and highly paid speakers. Listen as Zig Ziglar talks about how to establish goals and priorities.
In today's session, we're going to be talking about the goal-setting process. Now, for many people in this world of ours, the name Howard Hill will have no significance. He was raised over in Alabama. Howard Hill was an archer. He was a good one. He won 286 consecutive archery tournaments. As a matter of fact, he was never beaten in competition. It finally reached the point where he retired because the best bowmen in the world would not compete because they did not want to compete for second place. He killed a bull elephant with a bow and arrow, a Bengal tiger with a bow and arrow, a Cape buffalo with a bow and arrow. He killed an 18-foot shark under 15 feet of water. Or was it a 15-foot shark under 18 feet of water? It was one, all I know, it was a big one, and he was way down there. When I was a youngster, I've seen newsreels of Howard Hill where from 50 feet he would literally split the bullseye. I mean perfectly in the center. Then he would take his next arrow and split the first one. A remarkable demonstration of skill. Now, I've never professionally shot the bow and arrow, but I am an instructor extraordinary. That just means I'm good, real good. As a matter of fact, I'm so good as an instructor that I could spend 20 minutes with you personally, and regardless of what part of the world you live in, provided your eyesight is good and your health is good, at the end of 20 minutes, I would have you hitting the bullseye more consistently than Howard Hill could have hit it the best day he ever had as a bowman. Provided, of course, we had first blindfolded Howard Hill and turn him around a few times so he'd have no idea as to where he was. And you kind of sit there thinking, Ziglar, you dirty dog. Of course, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How on earth, Ziglar, you know we could beat him then. How on earth could a person possibly hit a target he could not even see? You know, that's a good question. Let me give you one even better. How can you hit a target you do not even have? 97% of the people on this earth do not really have an organized goals program. Now, that's not to say they do not have some individual goals, because certainly they do. But they do not have a total and complete program itself which enables them to win in every area of life. You see, there's a certain danger in setting goals, but there's an even greater danger if you do not set those goals. Many years ago, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a brilliant writer, a very famous jurist, an inventor, an unusual man, put it this way: the great loss in our society is not the waste of our natural resources, though that is great. He said the great loss to society is the waste of our human resources, simply because we do not recognize our own ability and then aim that ability in a specific direction. You see, man and nature are 180 degrees apart. We use up nature's natural resources by using them up. We use up man's natural resources by not using them at all. Yes, there's a certain amount of risk in setting goals, but there's even more risk in not setting them. The risk comes from the fact that truthfully you might not reach your goal, and then where are you going to be? You might be a little embarrassed about it, but let me say it again. The risk is infinitely greater if you do not set them, because you will be unable to use the incredible ability which you have. Yes, the first reason 97% of the people on this earth have no organized goals program is because of fear. Now let me tell you something, folks. Lack of time is not the difficulty. You know, you hear people talking about, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. The most successful human being on earth does not have one more minute than the most unsuccessful human being has. It is not lack of time that's the problem. It is the lack of direction. Years ago, the great merchant J.C. Penney put it this way: you give me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll give you a person who will make history. But you give me a person without those goals, and I will show you a stock clerk. You got to have goals. Can you imagine the chairman of the board for a major corporation like, let's say, General Motors, and somebody says to him, they ask the question, how'd you get to be the chairman of the board for General Motors? And he says, well, I just showed up for work, and they started promoting me, and first thing you know, here I am, chairman of the board. Would you believe it if somebody said that when Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to scale Mount Everest, when he climbed down off that mountain, and somebody came to him and said, Sir Edmund, how'd you climb the tallest mountain in the whole world? Do you really think, he said, well, I was just out walking around. Incredible. And yet there's so many people who think they can make it just by showing up for work and doing the best they can. Well, I'm in favor of both of those. But the best you can includes preparation and planning and direction. We got to have direction in our lives. And in this session, we're going to learn exactly how to set our goals. It is a process. Step number one, and you absolutely must make these notes. The first thing you do is you want to take a sheet of paper. Simply label it my wild idea sheet. And you want to print everything, and I do mean everything, you want to be or do or have. Now some people might say, well, Zig, if I did that, it would take me 3 days to put it all down. Let me assure you, you will be able to put about 98% of it down within the first hour. I suggest that you print it simply because when you print it, it requires more concentration. It burns it more indelibly into the subconscious mind. Now, I want to tell you one of the major benefits by taking this step. When you start printing everything that you want to be or do or have, what you're doing is programming the left brain. That leaves the right brain, which thinks in pictures. It leaves the right creative brain free to do its own thing. I'm going to make a statement which I cannot prove completely, but I believe it is absolutely true, and that is that the very process of putting it down will dramatically enhance your productivity. Now, the very process of putting all of these things down begins the programming process. Step number one, then, simply is print everything you want to be or do or have. And then the second step, you need to identify your major objectives in life. There probably will be from 2 to 5 of these major objectives. Now, what you do then is you wait somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. Now, during that time frame, you will add some other things to the list. Maybe not to the major objectives, but you will add a lot of the little relatively insignificant things. You'll think of a new car that you want to have or whatever. At the end of the 24 to 48 hours, then what you do is you get your list out and you ask yourself one simple question after everything you've written down, whether it's major or minor. And the question is, why? Why do I want to be or do or have? Why is this a major objective for me? And if you cannot satisfactorily answer that question in one sentence, then at this moment it really is not a clearly defined objective in your life, and you will scratch through that particular item. Do not black it out or obliterate it, because at a later time this might become a legitimate objective for you. But at the moment, what we've got to do is we've got to eliminate some of the items that are there, because the reality is you cannot work on 100 different things at the same time. We've got to start working toward finding the things which at this point in our life are important, while planning for the things ultimately in our life which are the most important. Now, the third step, once you've done that, is you begin to look for the balance in your program. You need to go down the list again and make certain you've got some physical goals, some mental goals, and spiritual and social and career and family and financial goals. You see, we've got to understand that we're seeking here a quality of life and not just a standard of living. And this in no way implies that the standard of living is not important. But historically, what you will discover is this: people who go for quality of life first invariably enjoy a high standard of living. But just because if you go for the quality of life, that does not guarantee the standard of living unless you put the balance in there. People who seek only money might gain it, but they are seldom really happy because they seldom have the balanced life which all of us seek. Now again, I'm not putting money down. Yes, money is important. I can tell you personally, I've had money and I've not had money. It's better to have it. But I just want to emphasize again, go for quality of life first, all right? Step number 4 in this goal setting process, we need to categorize our goals. We need some goals, for example, which are big. I love the story of gentleman Jim Corbett, the old heavyweight champion of the world. He was out doing his road work one morning, and as he ran down by the side of this mountain, there was a stream, and he saw a fisherman who was having a field day. I mean, he was pulling in the big ones, he was pulling in the little ones almost as fast as he could cast out there. But Corbett noticed something very unique, unusual, different, if you will, about this fisherman, because you see, he was putting the little fish in his container and he was throwing away the big ones. Corbett ran over to him and he said, "Sir, I'm a fisherman, and I've seen a lot of fishermen in my life, but I have never seen a fisherman throw away the big ones and keep the little ones. Why on earth are you doing it?" The fisherman sadly shook his head. He said, "Man, I hate to do it. But," he said, "I don't really have any choice. You see, all I've got's just this little old bitty frying pan." Now, before you laugh too loudly, let me point out he could well be talking about you or me. You see, a lot of times we have the big dream or the big goal, and no sooner do we have the big one than we almost literally say, "Oh no, not me. I can't handle a big one because all I've got's just this little old bitty frying pan. A lot of time we think, besides, if it's any good, somebody else would already have thought about it. Just give me a little old bitty one. Don't make me stretch and strain and sweat. Let me lie around in mediocrity. But I'm here to tell you, you got to have some big goals, because it's the big goal that brings out the enormous ability which is inside of you. Unless you have that challenge, then you're not going to reach your potential. So under A, we would put there simply, you got to have some big goals. Under B, you got to have some long-range goals. Now, folks, I'm not going to be negative when I say this, but you got trouble in front of you. You think you've just made the biggest sale of all time, and the check is going to bounce. You think your child's going to be the starting player on the first team? He's not even going to make the cut. You think they're going to make you president? You get your walking papers. I'm just saying to you that you got trouble in front of you. Now, why can I be so certain? Let me ask you, is there anybody here who's had any trouble in their past? Could I see your hand? Is there anybody here who has not had any trouble in their past? Now, what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is you need some long-range goals, because that helps us to deal with the short-range frustrations. You see, if you've got long-range goals, then the daily frustrations become as the pebble on the beach. If you do not have long-range goals, then a daily frustration can become like the whole ocean front. You got to have some long-range goals. Now, the rule is clear. You go as far as you can see, and then when you get there, you'll be able to see further. Goals need to be daily. Let me tell you how to be the very best in sales or marketing. Let me tell you how to raise positive kids in a negative world. Let me tell you how to build a magnificent relationship with your mate. Let me tell you how to move to the top of the corporate ladder. It is not by one earth-shattering event, but it is by a series of little things which you do every day of your life. You need to have some of those goals broken down into those daily portions so you can measure that progress. Psychologists calls it accomplishment feedback, and every step you take gives you more confidence that you can take the next one. A recent study reveals, for example, that one mistake a lot of people make is they want to move up the ladder too fast. They learn a job and then become bored with the job. Productivity experts are now saying that if instead of becoming bored with the job after it becomes routine, if they will start asking themselves the question, what can I do to make it easier or faster or better or less expensive? That the greatest ideas of all literally will come at that point. Under D, let's put, you got to have your goals to be specific. Most goals need to be specific. All goals are not. For example, building a healthy self-image might be a goal of yours. It's very difficult to say specifically, here's when I will have a good, healthy self-image. But most goals need to be very specific. You can take the hottest day the world has ever seen. Take the most powerful magnifying glass you can buy in a store. Hold that magnifying glass over a pile of newspaper clippings on that hot day. You'll never start a fire if you keep moving the glass. But if you hold that magnifying glass for a moment, you magnify the hotness of that sun through the glass, and boom, you've got a rip-roaring fire. When you zero in on what you want, that's when we begin to accomplish those things. Step number 5 in the goal-setting process involves asking yourself 5 questions. The first question is simply this: is this my goal? You need to think on that one carefully. Is it really my goal? The second one, is this goal morally right and fair to everyone concerned? Boy, that's such an important question. Is it morally right and fair to everyone concerned? You cannot accomplish the quality of life we talked about earlier if your goals involve running roughshod over someone else. Or you might move up a little faster, but you'll also come down a lot faster. And you'll probably have some ulcers along the way. The third question you ask in this step is, will reaching this goal take me closer to or further from one of my major objectives in life? Let me talk about money just for a moment. I believe that anybody who's having financial trouble, if they will look at questions number 2 and 3, is this morally right with everyone involved? And then the question, will reaching this goal take me further from or closer to my major objective? If you will answer those questions every time you get ready to buy something, I believe it will enable you to more closely zero in on what's important, really, ultimately, in your life. Now, the fourth question in this step is, can I emotionally commit myself to this goal? Don't ever kid yourself, folks. We are emotional people. Many times people say, well, I make logical decisions. Yeah, in a pig's eye you do. Most of us, much of the time, make emotional decisions. Let me give an example. The seatbelt in the car. Down in my state, when they passed the seatbelt law, everybody was so enthused. They were telling everybody, isn't it wonderful? The government is going to let us fasten our seatbelts. It'll save our lives. Isn't it great what they're doing for us? Now, how many of you believe that story? Okay, I didn't think so. You know what everybody was doing then? Saying, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. It's a free country. I want to fasten my seatbelt. I'll fasten it. I just don't want to do it. No telling what the government's going to be trying to tell me to do next. As nearly as I can tell, I have flown about 4 million miles. That means I've heard the flight attendant hundreds of times say, fasten your seatbelt. Click, 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 click. All over the airplane, they fasten the seatbelt. Interesting fact, in your car, if you fasten your seatbelt, the odds are about 3 to 1 that if you have an accident, it will save you from more serious injury, maybe even death. Now, in that airplane, if that sucker comes down, the odds are about 3,000 to 1. That seatbelt's not going to do you any good at all. And yet we gripe about it, don't we, when we have to fasten a seatbelt in the car. Like I say, ladies and gentlemen, we make emotional decisions, not logical decisions. Can I emotionally commit myself to this goal is the question. You got to have a yes answer. And fifth, do I believe I can reach this goal? You see, that believability will determine your effort. You've got to know that you've got a chance to reach that goal, or you really are not going to be free emotionally to put your heart in it. Now understand, there's a lot of difference between goals that are out of reach as versus out of sight. We need goals that are out of reach, because Browning years ago said, a man's reach should exceed his grasp. Or what's a heaven for? We need the big goal that makes us reach. But we don't want that goal out of sight, because that discourages us from the beginning. Now, the next step, you choose 4 of these goals that you can work on every day, and then you get busy on it. You simply cannot work on 100 different goals every day. But you choose the most important goals and you go to work on them on a daily basis. Then the next step, 7, is you review all of these goals at least once each month. That way you stay in touch and in tune with what you're doing. For example, I generally write about 3 books at the same time. Now that sounds ridiculous and foolish. But I don't really write 3 books at the same time unless you count the assimilation of materials and information. I start building a file at least 5 years before I specifically put the pen to the paper for the first time. And then every time I see an article or information relating to that subject, then I file it away. Sometimes I put something in every day. Sometimes there might be a 6-month time frame when I put almost nothing in it. That's what I'm talking about. Keep your goals in review at least once a month so you periodically come back to them. Now, in summation, I'm going to simply ask you a question. Do goals really work? I'm going to tell you a story. It's one of the most exciting, inspiring stories I've heard, and it says so much about the process we're talking about. A number of years ago in Brooklyn, a tour director for the museum was taking a number of underprivileged children through the Brooklyn Museum. They'd gotten only to the very entrance when the tour director stopped and pointed them to a statue of a Greek athlete. And as he was explaining this particular statue, he said, now, you know, in Greece, what they did was they took an actual person, a human being, an athlete, and then they made the statue as the athlete was. One of the skinny young kids there, a little youngster, ragamuffin type, he said, do you mean to tell me that a man actually looked like that? And the tour director said, sure, son, he really did. Then they went on with the tour. A few minutes later, the tour director missed this particular youngster out of the group, and he retraced his steps, and there he was, still in the entrance, looking at that Greek athlete. He asked the tour director, do you believe that that would be possible today, that somebody really could look like that? And the tour director said, why, of course I could. The young lad got all excited. He started writing these bodybuilding companies, and they started writing him back, telling him about their equipment, about how much it cost and all. And this young lad said, I don't have any money. But he had a tremendous imagination, and so he went to work and he started an exercise program on his own. He developed a process called dynamic tension. And for years and years and years, this young lad, whose name was Angelo Siciliano, which you probably have never heard, but I'll bet you recognize the name, Charles Atlas. Probably the most famous example of human physique in the history of this world. You see, he had a dream. He translated it into reality. It was a big goal. It was a long-range goal. He worked on it every day of his life. He visualized himself as already being there. He believed he could do it. He was emotionally committed, and you put all of that together, that's what setting your goals is all about. I'm going to encourage you to set your goals. Get busy on those goals, because if you do, I'll close as I always close every session by saying, if you do that, I'll see you. And yes, I do mean you at the top.